Mission and the agenda. So we do have a couple guests here this evening and we'll get to the introductions in just a moment then. HRC mission, the purpose of the Bismarck Human Relations Committee is to create an atmosphere of inclusion, equality, and accessibility through education and outreach to recognize the value of a diverse community. We'll go ahead and open up the agenda for public comment. Public comment. Seeing no one in person or online, we'll move to agenda item number 2, which is approval of the meeting minutes. Did everyone have an opportunity to look over them online? Okay. Any adjustments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Meeting minutes are approved for August. Moving on quickly to agenda item 3, partnered events. We'll move into crosswalk painting at this point. I don't know if Jason or Whitney had information on that or.
He's here to talk.
Oh.
So I'm Gabe Shell. I'm the city engineer for the city of Bismarck. So if there's anything that's done in the public right of way, generally speaking, from sidewalk to sidewalk, that's not private property, there's usually an ordinance that kind of catch all that finds its way to the city engineer, gets some sort of approval on something. So if someone wants to dig a hole, they get a permit from us. Usually it's to excavate down to connect the water main or whatever the thing might be. If someone wants to construct a sidewalk, they get a permit from us to be able to make sure that they construct it to our standards and they're licensed and bonded and insured and the like. So once that infrastructure is in place, and if someone wants to shut down a street to do a street fair, they would probably go through our office then to discuss shutting down a street fair or having a community event or something along those lines in that public space. For the most part, anything in the right of way, they come through the engineering office. Anything on private property, they work with community development because it's either a planning function, zoning, or a building inspection sort of issue. So those are kind of the demarcations. So if you want to paint something in a parking lot somewhere that's not in the right of way, I would not be here. I would say, you do whatever, talk to the business owner to work with whatever standards are applicable depending on the location, but not my concern. If you're gonna paint a crosswalk or wanna do something on a sidewalk or a street or something along those lines, I just wanted to have that conversation, understand what that thing is and make sure we find something that works for all the people involved.
Okay. Does anyone want to comment on this? Otherwise I can take the lead a little bit.
You can explain it since Sassy's not here.
Okay, so thank you for joining us first off. In previous conversations that have been held with this committee, there had been discussion about during the month of Pride, which is June, to possibly paint some of the crosswalks downtown rainbow colored, as other municipalities have done across the country and a few in the state. And so it was something we were wondering if the city would be open to discussing that for the month of June coming up in 2024. And I believe we had one intersection in particular in mind, and that would be.
It was 4th and Broadway, I think is kind of what. For some reason that area was brought up, and I think like 4th and Broadway.
Yep.
Yeah, it would be definitely the surrounding businesses, I think would be excited about it as well. But I think that was it, right?
Is that the one where it coincides with like Toasted Frog?
Yes, where it used to
Yes.
be. During the month of Pride, from what we could look into, the Dakota Outright organization partners with many businesses downtown, and they do Pride initiatives during the one weekend that Pride in Bismarck is held. And so those businesses we saw, there were quite a few that lined up on 4th and on Broadway. And so with citizens kind of interacting with the community and the businesses in that area for that particular weekend, we thought it may be something that we could help along with that festivities, being an advisory committee to the city.
Gotcha. So the first things that I would say, if we are dealing in the public right of way, there's obviously some rules, and we get rules that we get to set, and we get rules that we just have to abide by that are set by either state or federal things. So I don't know if you recall it or not, but a couple of years ago, we had a kind of a street activation project down on Main Avenue, where we installed a bunch of painted bulb out sort of things, and through that process, which was state sanctioned, in the middle of the process that the state was going through across lots of cities in North Dakota, they received input from their federal oversight folks saying that the color pattern that was used was not like an approved color pattern. If you want to paint a crosswalk, it can be red. That's it. It needs to be contrasted and it can be red. That is the official federal highway statement that they've noted. So our project had to go back through and paint the, polka dots that we might have had in some of the negative space within a curb extension, painted over them. So the whole thing's red. So we didn't use a lot of the yellow paint that we bought, but we used a heck of a lot of the red paint that we bought because they had to paint it all red mid project. And that was the same in Mandan and in Valley City and Grand Forks, et cetera. So and most of that is getting back to the driver compliance and making sure that crosswalk is safe. And that's where the rule was stated. At one point in time, the feds allowed states to be creative, like as they're trying to figure out high visibility crosswalks, what works, what doesn't. They would find that putting something that catches the driver off guard in that crosswalk while seemingly has good intentions would actually create crashes because that person isn't seeing what's happening. Like, what is that up ahead? They brake arbitrarily and someone runs into them from behind. So the feds say, okay, we're done trying this. We're just going to go say red is okay because we have data now saying that we tried the other colors that didn't work. So therefore, if we're in an area that is occupied by both the vehicles and pedestrians, we're a little more stringent on what are the colors we need to be, just like our stop signs, we need them to be red. That's all we can't have a green thing, but someone wants to put up a purple stop sign and put it on the window cling in their building, yeah, whatever, I don't care about that. But if we're trying to communicate to the drivers and communicate to the pedestrians of what that space is supposed to do, we do want to keep that pretty strict and say red is our color, or just contrast. It needs to contrast, but a rainbow hued thing probably wouldn't fly in the crosswalk. But on the sidewalk where it is just a pedestrian space, I would have the same reservations about that. That's just sidewalk chalk or art or things of that nature. That is way less of a concern than the crosswalk itself. So if there's an entire corner or one of those quadrants of one of the pedestrian kind of landing areas, if all that whole thing was painted, I would have way less concern about that than the crosswalk itself. So if that's a feedback that can be worked into the concept you're trying to do. And then we talk about, locations is specific, and then the materials that you're using. Just if it is an exercise that we're painting something in a material that upon the first rain, it just washes away. Okay, probably less concern. If it's, here's this really good epoxy paint that will be here forever. Okay, let's talk about that issue. Just understanding what is the intent, how long do you want it to be out there? If it's just for a weekend, we've done events with the library and public health areas where it is more of a chalk type artistic placement that we're not so concerned that eventually it rains. If it doesn't, we can wash it off with a hose and it goes away. Those are also probably easier to accept than something a little bit more permanent in nature. Okay, so those will be my two first thoughts that come to mind based on what you're asking here.
Okay. From my understanding, it would just be where the white demarcations are, right? Because with the crosswalk, is it the white demarcations going across? Is that correct? And so those would then become the red, white, or red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. It wouldn't be anything surrounding it. It would just be those. My question, I guess, would be, how do you think other municipalities have been able to sidestep this for a weekend?
I think mostly because they either didn't ask permission or someone from that fed or state level didn't know that it was happening. Because we'll see a lot of artistic asphalt artwork that's really cool looking. But the minute that if we were to try that, and we maybe just have a higher sensitivity with having a federal office in our community here, that those people contact us, so we probably get a higher proportion of OSHA calls and Fed Highway insights and things like that, because they just live here and they just happen to walk around and see some things. So the concept of coloring the white crosswalks a rainbow hue, I would not be able to support that. But coming off of the crosswalk and doing artistic treatments other places in the public right of way, perfectly appropriate and great to do that sort of thing. We do have some guidelines for downtown design review, and I don't know, I guess maybe look to Jason on that one, what triggers that?
Typically, that would be things on buildings, private buildings. I can't imagine or can't think of too many times where enhancements to the public right of way came up. That might.
So I know we did not go through downtown design review when we did our pop-up demonstration type project. So I think as long as that term isn't, we want this to be a corner that is painted like this forever.
Mhm.
Probably easier to say, well, we don't have to go through that step because it's gonna wash off in a weekend or whatever the time frame is that you're shooting for.
Is this something, if we were able to gain more information from other municipalities about how they were able to work it out for just a set amount of like a day, how they were able to work with federal guidelines and such, would we be able to bring this back to you and see if it was something that with further knowledge and information about, because I hesitate to think that other cities that have done this across the country and even within our state don't also have federal facilities on site, you know, within the community.
Yes, to the extent that that was maybe their path that they used, which might provide a path that we could use. But
Right, not that we would get permission, but just to give you further information.
sure,
about
I think that
possible-
wouldn't hurt. Like, I wouldn't have a strong concern. It gets back to that liability or that component of if we do something not to this standard, that standard's been documented, and someone does get hit walking across the street there, and the Fed said it's a bad idea, and even if we don't get their permission, and we just do it anyway, we're still, I guess, subject to that liability if something bad happens. So unfortunately, we're in a very risk-averse climate that we're just trying to minimize that liability as much as possible, even though it sounds like good old-fashioned fun. I had to tell some second graders at an elementary school that they couldn't paint a crosswalk artistically. I'm like, gosh, I am just the bringer of doom and sadness all over the place. But if everyone promised that they wouldn't sue if some kid got hurt there, I'll be fine. But honestly, that's probably not the situation that we're ever in the United States here.
I wonder too, though, because like when I'm thinking of the ones that I've seen, I don't know if that would, this is just a, stop sign. The ones I've seen are actually at like intersections with lights. Or, and I'm thinking too, I've seen them in cities where it's like the entire street and not just crosswalks. I mean, I don't know if
Okay.
that plays a factor into like, because, here I am.
And I'm looking and it doesn't, we don't have the same crosswalks
Yeah,
now
it's
that I'm seeing.
Picture.
But I mean,
The last thing we would want to do is
Outer
end up
Banks,
bringing a
yeah.
lawsuit.
yeah, because I'm kind of like I fully
Yeah.
understand, yeah.
And if there's concepts, I mean, just like we closed downtown for the street fair, or we closed, certain segments of roadways for events, if there's a concept that there's support to close a segment of roadway and that whole roadway can be closed down for community mural painting, we've done that before. To close the thing down, then you go crazy with whatever you want to paint it. It's just the conflict between pedestrians and cars is what we're trying to minimize. So in fact, we minimize by saying cars aren't allowed here today for this hour, for this day, for this 10-week period, whatever that is. Obviously, we wouldn't support the 10-week thing, but if there's a narrow thing that say, hey, on this weekend, we're gonna close this from here to here, okay, great. Go crazy, paint however you'd like it. Before you remove those road closed barricades, make sure you wash this thing down or away you go. Those are all things that we can work with too. Minimizing that interaction between a pedestrian and a car in a spot that might be unfamiliar for either of those.
Say like this was the intersection we chose, and I'm just going to use Wells Fargo as an example because I see them there. So they're the ones on the corner. It's still the city that is like, they can't complain that we are sidewalk chalking on that part of the sidewalk, correct?
I mean, from that standpoint, it is the public right of way. I think if we get real technical and specific about it, they just have an easement
So.
that is granted to the public for that land, and if it's ever reverted or vacated, it goes back to them, but it's like, well, in perpetuity, we have this thing on their behalf.
Right.
We generally want people to be talking to each other and not have a bunch of things out there that might offend this person or,
Right.
close access, and even when the folks right now we're building, or the owner of that property is renovating,
Yep.
so you have to close down 4th Street every once in a while, and that pisses off people, but it's like, well, that's unfortunate, but it's this guy that's doing it, he's pissed off the guy across the street because we have to close the road for that period of time, so just trying to minimize as much of that as possible just helps out everyone, so no one gets a target on their back.
It's all really good information. We appreciate
So
it.
if we were looking to do, like, let's say we could do the road, but we were looking to do the sidewalks. Is there a type of paint that we could use, or are you looking just us to do sidewalk chalk, and then if it rains, it's just gonna be gone?
I think if you were to do anything that is more permanent in nature, we would take that before the downtown design review. Because this is just like the artwork that we have on a mural, if there's any of the mosaics that we've placed on the benches around there, all those are concepts that have gone through that group to understand what their requirements are. And then usually they're pretty easy requirements. It's like no commercial messaging, nothing offensive, and then a definition of what offensive is. No written words are allowed. It can't say something. It can't say Bud Light on there. It can't say Acme Tools. I mean, it can't be an advertisement. Anything in that public right of in particular needs to be devoid of any commercial messaging at all. You can write CenturyLink on your building, but you can't stencil in CenturyLink out on the sidewalk because that's the public space.
You can stencil in "Have a good day" or things along those lines, but no advertising. Or is that a thin line?
I think once we start writing words, then it becomes, well, then it becomes a very subjective exercise, and then it's harder to defend that word versus that word versus that word. So a lot of times it's just no words and no commercial imagery, and then that can be art. We didn't finagle in the Bud Light stencil, amongst the artwork, and then really it's just a sign for Bud Light, but they somehow made it artistic. So it's just trying to avoid even that perception.
Even symbols, you're saying.
Commercial symbols.
What about like a pride flag?
I would, knowing that this is the conversation, I had to rack my brain to think like what the definition of a commercial symbol. I don't know if that symbol is actually a registered trademark type thing. If it is, then yeah, you probably wouldn't want that. It's like the American Red Cross might not be able to put that, even though it's just a symbol of a cross. I mean, those would be the types of things we'd want to hash out before you get too far in anything. Our goal wouldn't be to inhibit you, but the goal would be to make sure whatever you do is 100% locked, like defendable, no issues. You're just golden, ironclad, ready to go. No one can point a hole in what you're doing, really would be the goal.
And this wouldn't be just for Pride. It could also be Juneteenth or other events that we help facilitate throughout. We're just trying to gather information about where this conversation can actually go. What part can this committee play in working with the city in making things accessible to all, as many people as possible. And we look at, the most recent fair, that festival that went on for the Fall Festival, and just saying, okay, this is great, is there Oktoberfest, is there Juneteenth, is there Pride that we can utilize like other cities do to start drawing people to come together as a community.
Yep. And a lot of times we will allow multiple organizations to close down same segment of road, but only one organization can close that road down themselves once a year. I guess it's kind of on an annual basis. We want to have a monthly celebration that closes down Main Avenue.
Right.
Without, I guess, commission giving the blessing. If they give the blessing, do whatever you want, like, as far as that's concerned. But in ordinance, we can close down the road, I guess, even from just what's granted to the city traffic engineer to do a block party, a neighborhood block party, something like that. We get a little more sensitive if it's down here that affects other people.
Right.
If it's a sleepy cul-de-sac with 5 houses at the end, it's a little easier. But even in that situation, we make sure to ask the neighbors, or I should say, make sure that the applicant says that they've confirmed that they're okay with their neighbors, that they're shutting down access for a couple hours while they have the neighborhood barbecue.
Any other thoughts, questions?
I am sorry if I just am not understanding this. So let's say we wanted to paint all 4 corners on Broadway from 3rd to 5th Street, we'll say, or even just the 4th Street, but do we need city commission approval if it's those just on the sidewalks there? Or is it essentially you and your office's approval?
So any power that the city engineer's office has been granted to them from the commission. So even if there's an office that says the city engineer, city traffic engineer can restrict parking on a street, we use that language so that we can do that at some nondescript areas. But if we were to say, we're going to take Main Avenue and put no parking signs up and down Main Avenue because the ordinance says we can, that's something that we would say, maybe we should check in with the commission, make sure we have support for this thing. So the ordinance just doesn't get, taken out from underneath us. And because even the decision that we make if that's not the decision of the commission that they would support, they can overturn it anyway. So it's just faster, better for everyone to make sure that that support's there for that
So
thing.
whatever idea we come up with will go in front of the commission.
I mean, I think that's a more ironclad way of approaching it. It gets back to if it's a nondescript thing, I just want to sit on a stool and paint a little stencil in this corner, probably not that big of a deal. Heck, you don't even probably need to ask me. The kids don't ask me if they paint sidewalk chalk in their house. But if someone said, we're gonna go on the entire Century Avenue thing and put hopscotch on it for 6 miles worth and we're gonna paint it with epoxy paint, yeah, that'd be something you should talk to me about. So it is kind of a scope and scale and location. And I would say anything that you do in the downtown in a permanent nature, just to remind you that downtown design review that does look at the aesthetics. I'm not an aesthetics guy. I'm a liability, making sure it's safe guy. They're the ones that would say, ooh, I don't like that color. Like, I don't care about the color except crosswalks are red. But besides that, I have a strong opinion.
Any other questions?
So if you do have a concept or something you want to brainstorm, I can come back to this group anytime you would like, or even meet individually on a separate occasion too. So just work with Jason probably if there's a time you want me back, and I'll gladly be here.
Thank you very much for your time this
Yes,
evening.
thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay. We'll move on to agenda item 3B, equity and emergency management planning.
Yeah, well, first of all, introduce myself a little bit. Gary Stockert, I'm the emergency manager for the city of Bismarck. I'm part of the fire department, that's where I'm staffed. And so my day-to-day job involves a lot of things, but some of the cornerstones are planning, training, and exercising as it relates to disaster planning, whether it's, aircraft accident, tornado, flood, dam failure, whatever it may be, train derailments, so I kind of do a lot of coordination with different entities to hopefully never have to deal with some of those things, but sometimes they do crop up. And so what I'm here to talk about today is this concept of equity in emergency management. And it's not a requirement, obviously, for this committee, but FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has equity as one of their goals. I want to pass out a handout here to kind of make it go a little quicker and give you some things that you can reference a little bit as we discuss some of these things. So I'll give you 4 copies here, and that'll get you down to Jason. Give you a copy here, and I'll give Jason a copy. This document that I'm passing out, it's not some kind of official document. It's just something I put together as notes to try to explain this hopefully quite quickly and give you something that you can take and think about later too if you want. So again, like I was mentioning, the FEMA has a strategic plan, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and one of their goals is in their strategic plan is to instill equity as a foundation of emergency management. And then FEMA, they issue these grant funds, emergency management performance grant, and North Dakota gets funds. North Dakota as a state passes those on to local entities, including Bismarck. And one of the things they want us to do is explore how we can, integrate this concept of equity into a project of some kind. The good news is they don't have any really hard and fast rules as to this is the kind of project you must do or have to do. So they're really giving us some flexibility locally. And so I've got some ideas, but you guys may have some other ideas that are potentially better. One of the things I should say at this point is, really once FEMA, it seems to me once they initiate something, like in this case, this concept of equity, it's not something that they're going to just do for a year and then now we're done with that. It's going to be something that grows over time. So it's so this concept of integrating equity into emergency management planning is going to outlive my career with the city of Bismarck by far. So, so as it mentions there, so part of the concept is these projects can address the needs of underserved or at-risk communities to keep things fair from an equity. And so one of the things that's kind of interesting is their definition of equity. It's not, a lot of times people think, well, what's fair? And sometimes people think, well, to be fair, you gotta be equal. You gotta give everybody the same, whatever it is. FEMA, you know, they have a little diagram that they try to explain what equity is, and that is, let's say we have a grant and we're able to give everybody in this room a bike. Concept is if you give everybody the same size bike, it's not gonna work. Some people need different size bikes and some people might have disabilities. So the idea of equity is that it's not a one size fits all for everybody in all situations. So anyway, what they're asking us to do is to have a, you know, something where as we have in our grant applications and stuff, you know, kind of identify kind of a project that relates to equity and moves forward with it. One of the things that is coming up and is already in place, it's just that in the city of Bismarck, one of the documents that I coordinate the development of is called a multi-hazard mitigation plan. And that will be due for renewal in 2025, and I'll start the planning process in 2024. And that plan will need equity integrated into it as well. And that'll be a planning requirement to have that completed or to have that concept of equity built into those plans. FEMA does actually, that's one plan document that FEMA actually approves. Typically now, I guess, slight variation there. They've given North Dakota some authority to approve and, you know, review and approve plans, but FEMA does still audit plans. So even though North Dakota can technically approve the plan, FEMA does have the right to pull a particular plan and review it and make some maybe provide different opinions perhaps. So that'll be coming up as well. When I get to that point of mitigation planning, I anticipate that the main thing is integrating some populations or some other groups into the planning process through, you know, invitation or involving them if they choose to. Perhaps updating the community profile portions so that we identify any populations that might be disproportionately impacted as a result of an event. And so that little middle paragraph or understanding or defining equity, you know, I think even at the federal level, there's still, you know, going to be some modifications of this as time goes on, but just the basic concept of, you know, this is kind of describing it at first from the workforce perspective, but defining equity as consistent, systematic, and fair, just, impartial treatment of individuals and so on and so forth that have maybe been denied in the past. And then that executive order happens to also look at includes members of religious minorities or persons with disabilities, or people who live in rural areas, kind of like that one, because that makes it pretty easy for the rest of the state, because the whole state is pretty rural, but obviously we can't define Bismarck as that exactly. And then anyone that's adversely affected either by poverty or other inequalities. And now this assumption that I put in here is something that I found in a document when I was doing some research on this. The document was called Strategies for Inclusive Planning and Emergency Response. And it's just a document that came out of some fairly progressive communities, you know, New York, Seattle, and some of those sorts of things. And so their assumption is that most people who are disproportionately impacted following a disaster are very likely the same people that might experience some inequities or those types of issues on a daily basis. So not sure if that's, you know, true in our area or not, but it may have some truth to it, even if it's not to the same scale. But so now my initial project idea is, you know, and when I talked with Jason, I thought, you know, looking at your, you know, your mission and I had printed that off as far as kind of what your strategic plan is, seem to, you know, have a tie-in. So if we can identify, you know, populations or groups that might fit that definition of disproportionately impacted following a disaster event. You know, obviously we don't want that to happen, you know, so when we activate our emergency operations center, our intent is to respond and recover, not just for a portion of the community, but for the whole community. And we don't want to exclude anybody, but sometimes things can happen unintentionally. You know, there may be people who don't even speak English, for example, and they may not be getting the message that we're trying to get out. So my thought is, you know, if we, as a starting point, maybe, you know, who are the groups or the hate to use this term special populations, but who are those populations that might be disproportionately impacted? And then as kind of a piece to that, maybe look at identifying those liaisons or, who are the folks, if I can reach out to one person and they have their network, they have those, they can in turn communicate or share that message or make sure that that population is, getting that message. Maybe we're putting out public information, or maybe we're making information available about resources for assistance, or maybe FEMA's coming to town and they have a disaster recovery center set up and it's set up and operational. We don't want a certain segment of the population to miss that opportunity to go and apply, whether it's individual assistance or something like that. So my thought is, there may be points of contact. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that the best, or maybe individuals in some cases. It may be a John Doe or a Jane Doe who has good connection with a group of people, or it might be an organization and several. And, I'm not saying it's just one entity, obviously, or one population that we're looking for. So, so my intent would be if we can ensure those populations receive disaster information and make sure they're, as an example, when we get to that point of mitigation planning, if we can communicate and say, okay, the mitigation planning efforts are going on. If this community or that community would like to review the current mitigation plan, if they would like to offer ideas on how we can mitigate hazards, opening that door and allowing for that participation. So then as we move forward, or as I'm thinking about this, and there's 3 plans, for example, I can think of how I could potentially integrate this in with depending on what kind of information I may get from either this group or other groups too. But in the emergency operations plan, we identify roles and responsibilities. Maybe there's and sometimes it's city entities, but in some cases we identify roles and responsibilities of entities that aren't city, whether it's Red Cross, Bismarck Public Schools, Salvation Army, or some other entities. If the Human Relations Committee would want to say, okay, one of our roles is to, serve as a liaison to these particular populations, it could be written into the emergency operations plan. That's one concept. In the emergency operations center guide, that'd be another opportunity where I could say, well, we could integrate this within the public information component. Or maybe another option would be if we activate the Emergency Operations Center, maybe it's as simple as bringing in or linking in a couple, 2 or 3 liaisons so that those liaisons know what our EOC action plan is, they know what our intent is, and we can make sure that we're not dropping the ball when it comes to populations. And then, as I already mentioned with the multi-hazard mitigation plan, we want to get to that starting in 2024. So that's coming up quicker than a person realizes. So, but again, to kind of reach out and give any of these populations an opportunity to participate if they so desire. So, and it's when it comes to getting the public to participate in mitigation planning, it's kind of, to be honest, it's kind of tough. It's not something that people want to do. It's not, exciting necessarily. Although once you have a disaster event like we did in 2011, then you have meetings that follow up, then people show up in huge numbers, But, so if you don't have a disaster that's happened in very recent history, sometimes your participation is going to be very small numbers. So the last thing I want to do is tell you that, when we do these public input meetings on a mitigation plan, we're talking, I can count them on my 2 hands here. So we don't usually get large numbers, but we are required to make that opportunity available, and we're required to publicize that opportunity. So we do that in several ways, including through the website, so. Now there's other things that could be done in lieu of, this is not what I'm describing here is not mandated by FEMA, nor is it mandated by the state. The only thing that they're asking me is, or, saying to me as the local emergency managers, we need you to look at doing a project that ties in with this concept of equity and integrate that into emergency planning. Now, it could be something very different. It could be, you know, for this first year, maybe we want to do just some public outreach, or maybe, you know, maybe identify special populations that it could be an outreach, or it could be a public presentation, it could be training so that people know, well, what do those outdoor warning sirens mean when they're activated, or maybe some basic tips on preparedness. And if you had a population that didn't speak English, could still do the presentation, but the only language I speak is English, so you would need a translator. You know, you would need somebody who's going to attempt to translate what I'm saying, which could be very tough. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not sure. When I watch some of them, especially sign language, I'm impressed with how fast they can keep up with somebody. So with that, I just, you know, thought I'd maybe see what your guys' thoughts or impressions are, your initial thoughts or initial impressions, and if you have other ideas that come to your mind initially, and kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. And then again, at the same time, find out whether or not HRC even wants to be involved with this with something related to equity.
So I'm very excited by this. I like to do random FEMA trainings online and just, so.
All right.
But I think COVID was a great example. When you talk about languages, that's the first place that I kind of went. Just because, you know, I know Global Neighbors, we had brought on translators to translate just, you know, a flyer into, I know Spanish for sure. Swahili, you know, so there's that language barrier. I don't think people realize it is as significant as it is in Bismarck. I'm really excited. I'm sorry, I'm like super excited about this. I'm like, so I think, yeah, and I love the idea of even just, you know, kind of identifying the populations and then identifying that liaison for that person. And even if it's, because there's always turnover at agencies, there's turnover at, or like nonprofits even, but even if it's, you know, when I worked at state radio, we always had our first person on the list to call and then the second and the third, right?
Oh, you were a former state radio employee.
Yes,
Okay,
so,
okay.
you know, there was always contingency funds. So like, to me, I can very clearly see this being not a super difficult task once we identify the populations and then who could potentially, you know, be that. But that could go on to either just being identifying and then liaisons, or even then I could see it for public outreach training, you know, even those like public presentations where we could bring in, especially we were seeing an influx in Ukrainian, the Ukrainian population, Swahili, Spanish, yeah, you know, like there's a lot of languages that are spoken. So I think there's a lot that we could do with this.
Yeah, and which, maybe it was both hospitals, but I know they also brought in a lot of nurses from overseas, and I forget which
I'd
country.
say mostly from the Philippines.
Mostly from the Philippines, that's right, yeah, and but also worldwide, but I recall, yeah, you're right, Philippines was the most predominant one. And, you know, just keep in mind too, this is one of those things, especially when it comes to emergency management, you know, its best approach is always slow and steady,
Yep.
you know, so it's, like I said, equity is never going to, this concept, I don't see this going away in the next, I mean, it's probably here to stay for at least the next 10, 15 years or more, who knows? You know, or at least until they get to a point where they feel like this has been addressed adequately. And sometimes these things take longer than 10 or 15 years. That might be an understatement, but I'll be retired before then. So like I said, it'll keep going. So I appreciate the ideas that, you know, so we don't have to knock it all out in 1 year. So I think, you know, to start with something and keep it moving, slow but sure is.
What is your time? Because this is for a grant proposal, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah, so the first EMPG grant, it mentions 2023, the fiscal year 2023 with the EMPG grant is actually started July 1 of 2023 and it goes through June of 2024. And then the mitigation plan, our city's mitigation plan expires June of 2025. And it's about I don't know, just estimating about a 500-600 page document. So it takes me close to a year to get through the whole thing. for updates. And so that I'll probably want to be starting that planning process early in January 2024. And it's not going to be very hard, I think, at least, especially if we initiate this, we identify populations and points of contact or liaisons. Then from there, when I start that planning process, those invitations, those liaisons can receive that invitation and they can make sure that others are aware of that opportunity to participate in that. So yeah, no, the grant funds haven't, and the grant actually has not been awarded yet, but it's it's one of those things where that's just how it sometimes works. So yeah, I guess, my thought is if that seems doable, and again, I'm not ever going to say, no, we can't do more. We can do as much as HRC wants to do, to be honest with you. So whatever you guys feel comfortable, if you're willing to, I guess what I'm looking for is, are you willing to kind of take the lead? I can still participate and help out and maybe bring in other people who might have some ideas too, but, just to identify those, if you have some thoughts on identifying the populations and the liaisons, does that seem doable? This group, I don't know.
Do you think maybe a subcommittee for it? Or what are you guys thinking on that?
I know you're talking about people with different languages. My concern would be individual developmental disabilities, because that's what I do for my job. And I wish Darcy was here, actually. We, at my agency, they have staff and we have whole ring of people that would be there, but I know there's a lot of individual developmental disabilities who don't receive services anywhere and don't have family here, and it would be hard for them to understand if there was a dire emergency what they would need to do. So my concern would be individual developmental disabilities as well.
So we really could then, his initial project of really ironing out the specific populations and just kind of who so you then would really be able to help identify those main players in that realm.
So, and I don't want to get into the weeds on this first meeting, but just as an example, like even that document that I referenced, this is just a few pages of it, but strategies for inclusive planning, emergency response. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there's a list here of different types of populations, and we could, if there's a subcommittee, for example, they could scan through this list, highlight the ones that seem applicable, brainstorm. There might be some that aren't identified here that, okay, we should identify that. So, I don't think we'd have to start from scratch or start from zero. As far as brainstorming, we'd have some resources that, can bring to that. And I'd be glad as a liaison, obviously with emergency management, to be on that committee, subcommittee, if you choose to do something like that.
Having those liaisons would be helpful beyond even just like that information, just like thinking of like with the community engagement unit and their use of liaisons that helps with those relationships and creating trust. And then just recognizing that depending on the population and stuff, there might be some of that lack of trust with certain entities. And so I think that this would be a helpful way to build up those relationships as a whole too.
Right, yeah, because they might see somebody like me with a uniform on and they may or may not.
The last flood that came and taught us a lot as far as our agencies go, because we didn't really have disaster planning for a flood, and a lot of our individuals down south had to evacuate, and where were they going to go? So now we have policies through the state that are in place. So as far as where they go, if they would go with family, if we would have to relocate them to a hotel or something. So it's very specific how it has to be now. So I at least have that experience as far as that type of planning for these DD individuals.
I just wanted to speak about the siren.
Sure.
When it went off the last time, so many people in my community were just confused what that was.
The outdoor warning sirens, yeah.
Yes.
There were some new ones that were installed. Had they not heard it before, or were they that new to Bismarck that they?
They're new to Bismarck, they really don't know. So I feel like when we're trying to put those resources where they're needed, we should be thinking about like these populations. I really feel like once you go live in Bismarck, they know things like sounds, they know things like the flooding, what happens if flooding, what happens if there's a threat or something, where to go to. I really feel like we are having a new population that is not being attended to, and because who is here already is doing so well. We're not looking into like who is coming in. It completely like shuts the light on who is coming in, and so I really feel like maybe if you can look at where the resources go, which population would you need like the most on that committee? What if you're doing like a committee liaison or whatever? Which population do you need like more people coming from, pulling from? That should be something we are thinking about, not just yeah. Might have lost my thought, but
I know what you're, yeah, and so to me, this committee can be very helpful because, yeah, as myself, as one individual, I'm the single emergency manager, City of Bismarck, and so I do a lot of this stuff, but you mentioned the outdoor warning sirens as an example, and it's, making sure that everybody understands what that means, even though it's not that complex, so basically we do a test on the last Friday of the month at 9:30, unless the sky looks kind of ominous, because then at that point it might seriously cause some confusion if we're doing a test when the skies look kind of scary. But so that test occurs at 9:30 in the morning, but on the last Friday of the month. So, but if they're sounded at any other time, they really mean just one thing, and that is go indoors, seek shelter, turn on the radio, and find out what's going on. Now, 90+% of the time, it's going to be related to an outdoor tornado warning or something like that. But they can be sounded for any purpose. So if you look back at Grand Forks, when they were flooded, when the levee system broke, they sounded their sirens. Anyway, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I just want, and I'm assuming you guys don't have to make a decision today. You can kind of discuss it further in the next meeting or however you want to handle it.
I like your point, Geraldine, looking at utilizing the grant money maybe in different ways that aren't traditional, or this community in outreach into different areas, and how can we utilize it to get to the places that we aren't traditionally getting to carry even basic emergency management within our city. And so, we all kind of have our communities that we would interact with, and I think about the unhoused communities a lot, and it's like, they have no idea what do you do when there's suddenly an emergency. We don't have public shelters that can take an influx of unhoused people, and there's no real plans that are being communicated to them that, oh, what do you do when you hear an emergency? You have nowhere to go, so do you try and find high ground, or do you go into sheltered places, or do you go, where do you go? So.
And I can certainly address some of those, especially with the subcommittee, so I don't want to get into too much detail, but just so I thought maybe I might have given you the wrong impression too, because I was talking about grants. So when it comes to that grant, it's an annual grant that you get every year that helps, it comes from the Fed to the state, and it just helps support emergency management programs. And actually this year I'm getting less money than I did last year, but there's more requirements. So that's how it usually goes. So as far as funding to do special projects, I may have monies to do certain things or do a print in a brochure that's in an alternate language or something like that. But I hopefully I didn't get any impression that I've got any kind of big bucks to do anything, but I might have a few dollars that I can do for certain things. And if we come up with ideas and it has an expense or a cost associated with it, I can, it may be an eligible expense. It'd just be an issue of whether or not I can afford it. But we can certainly look at those things.
And that's where those liaisons could come in though, because those organizations may have the funding then
Right.
to assist. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in today, Gary.
Yes,
That's
thank you.
definitely something that, could we please keep it on the agenda for next month then to discuss how we would want to meet your ask.
And let me know, would you want me to be here or not be here for the next one?
I think we should be okay
Yeah.
without
Okay,
you here at the
yeah,
next one.
Yeah, and I can, if anything comes, I can sure follow up with you
Sure.
following the meeting. And
We would probably come up with an idea of a plan or who would like to be on the subcommittee, or hopefully we have more of the committee here so we can have a better
Okay.
understanding.
Sure, that's fine. I just didn't want to leave you stranded and go, why isn't Gary here? You know, so-
Thank you very
Okay.
much for coming in here.
All right, well, I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Can we also have a copy of, like your the implementation plan, just so we know like what you did before the grant? Just a visual picture of what you've done before, how it worked. You said you've had the grant over the years, right?
Oh, yeah, the grant, the emergency management performance grant, what it does actually is it primarily just supports the emergency management position. And it supports maybe a few operational expenses, but for the most part, it doesn't really give me dollars to go and buy like equipment or do, you know what I'm saying? It's primarily dollars that offset the salary and benefits of the local emergency manager.
Are the multi-hazard mitigation plan or the emergency operations center guide, are those public documents that like listed on the website? Because is that what you were asking?
The mitigation plan is a public document. The emergency operations plan and the EOC guide are not, but I can give those to you. And all I gotta do is redact, you know, some phone numbers and a few things like that, but I could certainly get.
But I think though, if the multi-hazard one, we're not gonna wanna read, we're not gonna wanna read all of them, but I think if the multi-hazard is, that'll kind of give an idea of what they're currently doing. But that one, is that just on the city?
It's on the city's website, but, and so would it work? Could I email these?
Whitney can send a link to everybody. That way those that aren't here
Okay.
can have that and review it for next time. And when the draft minutes are out, they come back and read the minutes or watch the meeting and see what they missed. So-
Because I could certainly, in a PDF format, I could share the emergency operations plan and EOC guide with just the one section redacted and then the link to the mitigation plan.
If you can share that with Whitney, then Whitney can get it to this group.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you so
very
much.
for coming in.
Gary.
Good on this. Thanks, we did. That moves us right into agenda item. Oh, I apologize. Were there any comments or questions about that agenda item?
Question,
Mhm.
why do we not wanna just vote now to set up a subcommittee?
I want to sit on the information actually, and I want to see more. I just want to see more information on this. I'm not comfortable having a vote.
Having
I think we
more
need to call for a vote next time though.
informed voting might be a little better. And then just in case those who are missing would like to also attend and
And
have
I'll just
ideas.
I'll kind of put this in layman's terms, like a hazard plan. I don't know if anyone's ever had to deal with them or read them like we do in the guard. It's really just like what happens at the city level. It's like their policy if something goes in. So when I heard grant, I think we all kind of thought we'd get to do things with the money, you know, like translation or things like that. But it's really, I think, my understanding is that they're just trying to include how we can make sure people are not being missed, because how people don't have access, you know, to certain things. But yes, that's all I have.
Yeah, I just feel, for me, I feel like I need to see a little bit more engagement from their end. It's something they've been doing for so many years. If there's a step in added to, I just want to see like, I don't know. I'm not just ready. I'm not just at a place to poke my head out.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I think what I heard Gary say that's different about this year's plan is that it must include equity where it hasn't before. So that's kind of what's caused him to come here to have this conversation, knowing this group could be a resource. So without this group, he might be left to do this on his own or with, you know, others within the organization. But I think just knowing your networks and how you can be connected, there's a way to spider that out a little bit. I think that's really what he's asking for here. So not a huge lift, not a lifetime commitment by any means, but more just that idea of let's collaborate on this and see what we can add. It doesn't have to be everything, but maybe it's just identifying the top 5 languages for translation services and what I heard him say is the list of underserved populations and how to try and communicate with them.
And liaisons to make like a network of community outreach if an emergency happens.
Yes, and a big part of Gary's world, because he is the emergency manager, is plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Yeah.
So these are things that may never be used, or by the time they are used, they might be 20 years old and quickly found to be outdated. But regardless, this is his role. This is what he does, and when we need him, it's great because he's here. And the best thing is that plans happen and then we never have to really implement them. But I think this is one that's probably long overdue anyway, and it gives a good little nudge to get it started. So.
Perfect, if we can at least get it on the agenda for next month then. Well, further discussion on that. If everyone is comfortable, we can move on to the next agenda item. All right, agenda item 3C, Dakota Pro Musica Performance Event.
I have communication with Jason. The event is going to be at no cost if people want to attend, because they've gotten enough sponsorships. I think they're taking some type of donation, like if you want to donate or not. And then they are doing setup. You can do a table. Our organizations can do tables. And I just texted him because he said he was going to send out information, but we didn't say anything. So he said 6:30 that night, we can do setup. I'm going for
And
sure.
that is
I'll be there.
Friday, October 6th.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
I just need to make, I no longer have this stuff, right?
I'll be back here,
Okay,
to the best of my knowledge.
I'm pretty sure I handed it off at Friday.
I think you gave it to me and I
Yes.
brought it here, I hope, because I don't have it at home anymore.
Yeah, I think we've got everything here.
That is at 6 p.m.
October 6th, 6:30 is the setup.
Yep, Friday, October 6th at 6:30 at Trinity.
Trinity Lutheran.
And the
Yeah.
concert itself starts at 7:30. I just know I was coming, I think, straight from work.
Let me look.
Yeah, I shouldn't really commit that day because I'm flying out.
7:30 is the concert, yes.
Okay, perfect.
7:30 is, okay.
Yes.
I'll be,
Are we setting a table for you and your back? We're just showing up.
We're doing a table, is what I understood, correct?
And
okay.
I'll be there.
Because we're one of the
for sure.
sponsors. Yeah, I'll be there.
We are sponsored. Did we
Yes.
vote on that?
Yeah, we already paid
We
him.
already
I
paid
don't
them.
think I was here.
Check one out.
Cool.
We're in the middle, right in the middle, center middle.
I may be zipping from the airport straight there, so I can commit to cleanup or hanging out after the concert if that's part of it. I don't know if we can man the table before and after like we've done before, or how they're gonna be doing it, but
I'm sure it'll be fine.
if everyone's okay, I can't commit to setting up.
We'll
'Cause
literally set up, go to the concert, and then probably come out and tear down. I mean,
Okay,
I don't feel like you need to rush either,
I'll
just to
still
help
rush
tear
because I
down.
don't wanna miss the concert.
Yeah, I know.
And I don't wanna put it on all of you, so I'll be taking everything. Okay,
Tia, can you pick up the stuff for it? Set up?
Should be. Yeah, I'll get it that week. Yes, if I have to use my husband's car, I will. I'll coordinate with Whitney and I will get it.
any other comments or questions on the Dakota Pro Musica event?
Maybe just one comment, since you are a sponsor, since HRC is a sponsor, obviously a part of this organization, we could use this opportunity to promote it a little bit on our social media. Anybody, I don't use social media, I don't have an account, so I'm not looking for any of it, but if someone could, if there's an announcement out there already, it's very easy for us to share that. If there's not, You could talk to Kalen and say, hey, could you whip something up on behalf of the Human Relations Committee, inviting people to the concert as a sponsor?
I believe there's an event on
I-
Facebook.
Because I have to email him some pictures tomorrow anyway.
To Kalen?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I can do that. Do you think we should just do the poster or the event on Facebook?
I would think linking the event.
Okay.
The
Or,
poster, the event has the poster.
Yeah, and then I'll let him just know how he wants it. Yeah, I'll do that tomorrow.
yeah, and then he can just decide if he just wants to do. All right. Hearing no more comment on the agenda item, we'll move forward to agenda item number 4, build committee recognition. Sub-agenda item A.
So speaking of Jason from Dakota Pro Music, I got a call from Ben today from Dakota Media Access. There's been some technical issues with DMA. They have been phenomenal and great, but Jason's episode got aired one extra time and Sassy's got cut one time on Saturday. And so he is going to try to find a time if they can get it on their schedule. But if not, we have the on-demand ones. So we can just ask you guys again, if you are on social media, Kaylin does a great job on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm not on Twitter much, so I don't know what we do there. If you guys could just be resharing those podcasts, that way we're getting people on demand in case, glitches happen on the radio. Not to mention, some of them have been going over 30 minutes. And so when I edit them, they're a little bit shorter on air than they are on demand anyway. And we did get the okay to do Spotify if we could figure it out.
Yeah,
So if you
I
wanna
will get
connect
you
with whoever,
connected,
yeah.
100%.
They said that we could do Spotify. They also had said,
Sorry.
oh,
Spotify, unless there's something about advertisements. We can't be making money or something like that.
I don't believe
Okay.
we would at all.
Yeah.
No, because we're a city organization, and so I believe there's a way to set it up.
Okay.
But if I know money,
Sassy should, unfortunately, Sassy should air more than everyone's because she had to tape twice. Well, I guess Jason had to tape twice too.
here's my question. Why wouldn't we just be able to push back and it'll give you a breather? And
Well,
have
that was
Sassy
another
air
option was
next?
if we want, so cause Sassy should air this, Sassy aired. She should have aired, so she did air Tuesday,
But didn't Saturday?
but didn't Saturday.
So she could go Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday.
I heard it on Saturday.
Sassy or Jason?
I heard Sassy. Saturday morning?
Yeah. He told me
No, I heard it.
that we missed the Saturday. So that was another option. We could just put Sassy one more week.
I heard Jason's 2 Saturdays ago.
Should have been, yeah. So the thing is they're also doing their best. It's not like, they're also extremely crammed. So, I mean, do we want to just have them put Sassy on? Because Sassy should be on through the rest of this week, and then it should be whoever's next week, right?
Lindsay's next.
Lindsay, yes, she should be next week. So we can have them push Sassy through next week as well if we want.
I think just push her through because the next 2 guests don't know when they're even on.
Okay.
Okay.
That'll buy us some time because we had to re-record. So we're a little cramped, so I don't think that's a bad thing.
I need to email him right this second before I.
So as far as while you're doing that, I can talk about,
You're good.
we got an email from Jason in regards to our, what is that social media thing you sent us?
Analytics?
Analytics. She would have known what it was.
Sorry.
Analytics about as far as our posts go that Keelan had sent out on Facebook, and then we're all the other entities. And we, by far, I think we're the #1 post that was shared and liked and
Wow.
had views or whatever. So, I mean, the more we can do it, the better. And there seems to be a lot of people that are listening on the radio, not just online.
Okay.
So it'd be great if we could do Spotify as an outlet too, because a lot of people don't use Mixcloud.
Right,
They'll-
I've
they'll
never
go
even
on
heard of
Spotify.
Mixcloud.
Yeah. So as far as our guests coming up, so she'll delay Sassy's for another week. After that is Lindsay Peterson from,
Radiate Wellness.
okay, Radiate Wellness. And then Nicolette Daschendorf from the Guard is after that. All amazing guests.
Yeah, I mean, we got some good guests. We do.
So then our next one to tape is Kelsey Zotnik from Tracy Sanctuary House. And she's taping October 4th. Then hopefully Tyler Elk.
Yep, Tyler Elk we're waiting on him to confirm. He said he'd let me know for sure tomorrow. And then for November, we've got a list of people that we're really, wanting to hit, so
And it keeps on getting bigger and bigger.
it
But
does.
the guests that we've had have all been pretty amazing. So we feel very lucky to interview all of them. Sassy was very good. If you haven't had a chance to listen to her, I would listen to her. Oh, and Jason co-hosted with me too. For Jason Toms. So that was a retape that we had to do, so he did a good job.
I
So
forgot about that until I was like, why is Jason's face on it?
I think we all should just pop in occasionally on these two.
Show up, it's fine.
Do you think we could try and reach out to, say, the owners of El Coqui or some more to try and get some more representation of some of the newer Americans that are coming in, Puerto Rican communities, different things? Do we have anything like that?
Who are you gonna reach out to?
Upcoming?
So I'm gonna reach out to Pastor Louise, who's an immigrant from, I don't remember the country. He spoke at our Global Neighbors event. They just did a large news article on him about his church is now, they're translating church services into Ukrainian language. However, even before all of this, he had been having their Spanish services translated into English, and so we're gonna reach out to him. I mean, we're not opposed to it. We've got a list that we're building if
We
we
have a
wanna.
list, we have a Google Doc with a
You wanna
list
send
of
them?
all potential guests, so if you have other people's names, if you wanna email, text us, whatever, and we can put it on there. So it has a list of who they all are, if we'd ask them if they said yes or no, and then basically when they're gonna be on the show.
I wonder too, like with like all the, so many different industries that have been recruiting internationally, but then with like the visa retrogression and how that has had an impact, like if that could be a potential
Oh, that sounds amazing,
topic too.
sounds very
After
interesting.
like, be a good person to talk
We're looking into somebody from the Philippines community, because I mean, they're establishing within our community very well also.
about. I can always, if you want, I can always check with like our nurses to see if.
Talk about what it's like coming into Bismarck and trying to settle and how the human relations aspect of that is.
Is like, we do a lot of pre-planning.
Mhm.
Beforehand, we always meet beforehand and go over the questions, and we send the guests the questions ahead of time. There's only been one guest we've asked exactly the questions, and only because of policy. Other than
No,
that-
you did.
I went deviant, and then she wouldn't let me answer it.
The first time she like fully goes full off script, and we can't because we had to work with the public affairs office, but it was awesome. It was awesome.
My fault. But we send them the questions beforehand, like a couple weeks beforehand, so they know what they might be asked. Not saying that's not ever all we ask, but just so that they know.
Yeah, and we actually too, I don't know if we've said that, like a lot of times when we invite a guest and they say yes, they want to be on there, we always extend that if there are topics that you want to cover, or if there are certain things that you need us to put into a question form, so that way that they can really get their voice across as well. But
And then we follow up with them, letting them know when theirs are gonna be aired, and then very encouraging of them to post it on all their social media and to have their workplaces. Like Sassy's, I noticed the Bismarck Public Schools posted hers. And the Indigenous, specifically the Indigenous program posted hers. They shared the city of Bismarck's post. So, I mean, that generally, if you look at the viewership, those ones are higher because it's being shared more.
Any questions, comments on the podcast? Okay, moving into agenda item 5, Municipal Quality Index Subcommittee update. I guess my first question would be, has city administration heard any? Okay.
Just your email nudging them again last week.
All right, so I will read to the committee the email I sent to the MEI. So we recently were able to meet with the National HRC MEI staff. And at that point, that was August 28th.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Yep, Monday, August 28th, so almost a month ago. 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks since. And they let us know that they would be getting back to us by the end of that week with updates. And we had not heard anything. And so 5 days ago, I emailed them and said, just following up after our meeting, as we hadn't received any feedback on where Bismarck stands with the attached attempts to work on improving our MEI scorecard. And the attached is what we had sent at the beginning of the year after the work we had done the last 2 years. Said we have been anticipating the response and guidance to bring back to the Bismarck HRC, city admin and department heads and our city commission, as we have been trying to work on this since 2021 and have made it a part of our strategic plan for the committee. Look forward to any guidance you can provide as we're going into our September planning and meeting next Monday, which is today. Thank you for your time and effort. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns. The attached attempts at improving our scores are attached. Again, I don't know why I said that twice in the email, but it was a
For affirmation.
yes, just in case you forgot. So
But they only gave us 10 days, right, or something?
August 31st was the cutoff suddenly because I thought it was September, but then when I went back into the email, or a new email that came out, it was August 31st. So 3 days after we met with them, they closed for review to put out the new scores. So we should be seeing new scores, even if we don't hear from them. Hopefully they take under consideration what they said they would take under consideration.
Which they had not seen prior.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. So everything that had been set before they said they did it.
Didn't see?
Mhm.
Oh my goodness.
So the difficult thing for us
Wow.
is that we've done 2 years of work and submitted it in the hopes they'd give us guidance as to, are we on the right track for submitting this kind of information? Or can you give us guidance as to what we need to correct? And we haven't been able to receive that. And so
Did the meeting go well with them?
I thought it went amazing.
They were pleasant,
Yeah,
Okay.
receptive, I thought.
Yeah, responsive.
encouraging.
Yeah.
It seemed like a good outcome with a week turnaround.
Yeah, I will say the turnaround was like every time I give myself deadlines to people and I'm like, I'll get this to you in 2 days, and I know it's going to be at least 2 weeks after I say that, but
Yeah, but this is a lot longer than
yeah.
I had thought.
It really causes me to question the integrity of the organization and whether or not it's even worth it to try and get their attention at this point. Not to tell the group what to do, but to your point, Mr. Chairman, this group has spent a fair bit of time and not even to be recognized is pretty shameful.
Yeah.
I was thinking positive things because they were willing to meet us over Teams or however they met you guys.
Yep, they sent the link
Yeah.
and they had 2 representatives and there were 3 of us and like high fives all the way around.
She was.
Now that we've said that, tomorrow they'll fire back this
Right.
glowing review and the scores will be in the
You guys are
80s.
amazing. Well, thank you. We'll do this again.
Cause I wonder too that like, I know like they have other indices too of like how well individuals, I mean, there's definitely some individuals who seek out that stuff to know and then are aware of it. But as a general, I guess, I don't know how aware people are that these like these even exist.
Oh,
But then also thinking of, even if it's not so much the relationship with them and getting the score of like at least looking into good areas of opportunity to keep growing as a community. Sorry, my allergies got
You're
really
good.
irritated in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, agreed. Our hopes had been to be able to utilize this information within the business community, within, you know, to start helping to grow the community. Yep. Oh, I thought, I thought you were getting my attention.
and to use the scoring across different entities.
Right, then we were going to take this format and utilize, which we still can. You know, we've gone through a 2-year process now, and though we may not be getting the response we were hoping for from the parent organization, we can start utilizing this format in addressing other underserved populations and how we can get the city departments to look into how they address and interact with these communities. So it's not all for, you know, a loss. In my mind, we've learned quite a few things in how to navigate and how to advocate with these department heads across the city who are very receptive, and we didn't know that before, you know? And so we've always hoped and had an understanding that they were, but the way they engaged us was amazing. So, and I'd like to give kudos to the city administration for helping to guide and lead us through this process, so.
To that, Mr. Chairman, thank you, but also I just wanted to share, I think it was just last week, Renee Mock opened up a letter from Dakota Outright and they got their certificate for a safe space award. So these connections that are happening are a result of these conversations. The library is, and prior to this, was making some very intentional pronouncements and activities and things like that. So I think just, you know, for them to know that you're here and for you to know that they're here, that might be worth more than any score from some national organization that can't
Right.
respond to an email.
Yep. How we can interact. I know that the park board is interested in meeting with this committee also. I recently spoke with some members of the board and that was brought up that they had heard from other departments within the city that they were doing some work with us as a committee and they would like to engage us also. So I think the conversations that are being held are a direct result from this process. And so I just want to thank the entire committee for us forging ahead with this. So I wish we had more uplifting news, but that may be coming this fall. So that's all I have. Any questions or comments on that agenda item? All right, that opens up the floor to agenda item 6. Any other business committee members would like to bring to the committee?
I have some, but you can, whoever needs to go first.
So just really quickly, I just kind of wanted to get first I'll let you guys know, I don't know if you knew this, I just found out today that this Wednesday, the 20th, Bismarck State College, in collaboration with the National Guard, are hosting Culture Fest 2023. Yep. And so it says it's a great opportunity to get out of the office, sample cultural foods, and learn something about the various cultures that are on display. I was just hoping to get the okay to maybe reach out to the National Guard rep and ask that maybe we be included next year and see if there's any way that the committee could, or even at least be aware of it more than 2 days in advance.
What time is it?
It's 11 to 1 at BSC's college, or their student union, building 5. And it says they'll have various booths with different types of food and provide attendees with general information. There'll be door prizes. And then BSC is serving brats and Nefla as part of Oktoberfest.
So anybody can go?
Yeah.
Not just for BSC students?
I mean, no, it says as, Guard, we were encouraged to attend, so.
I'll tell my son, my daughter.
Yeah, so if it's okay, I would just like to reach out to this rep and just say, like, if this is an event next year, do you want to just ping us an email in case something that we would like to work with? Okay.
And mine was, I'm just curious as to when we're opening up the nominations for the Humanitarian of the Year Award for 2022. I just looked and,
2022?
yeah.
2020.
No, it's 2022. The last 2 people that won were in 2021, and it was Geraldine and the library. I just happened to be on the website, our website the other day looking for something.
Yeah.
Those were the last two.
Let me ask when the last, look back at years past.
Yeah, my work said 2021.
When have we done other than that?
I'm like, oh gosh, we didn't do it last year. Okay, we need to.
Are we, I think we award for the previous year's
Yes, we do.
actions and commitments. So I think we're right, but we need to award it before the end of the year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the celebration itself has been moved, which is probably part of why the
We
timeline.
were talking October, we would have been presenting it in person at that forum if we would have had it then. Okay.
I think we figured it out though,
What are you gonna do?
like that it's.
Well, if we can open it up, we were thinking that we probably need it awarded by December.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Sorry.
no,
We realized we were going to be doing it in October when we were planning the original forum, because we wanted to do it in person, but we've now moved that forum to the spring.
February, I thought. We were looking at February, so you can
Late
give,
winter.
so you can give
I
it,
call it early
you can
spring,
give it in February then.
right?
Yeah.
But do we wanna, oh, sure, we could. But in 2024 for 2022?
And then you could almost like
Well, you can award it, you can say who it's gonna be, but then you can give
give
them the
them,
award.
yeah.
At the,
Yeah.
oh, we can say who it's gonna
Yes.
be before year end and then
Yes.
present the award at the forum.
Yes.
Okay.
And depending then on timing in the, like moving forward in the future, like, does it make sense to open 2023 nominations, come that event in February and
Yeah.
announce, hey, this will be open,
Yeah.
come sometime soon in the spring or something like that.
So could we then start taking nominations October 1st?
Sure. It's just a press release and putting the application back on the
And
website.
then how long do we usually take them for?
Running until mid-November?
Well, if you want to be able to review them and make a decision, probably want that for your November meeting, which would
So-
mean we'd need to get it out to you the week before the third Monday, which really what we're talking about here is probably just have it open the month of October.
I'm just gonna say, a whole month should be long enough, you think?
Yeah.
Because today is what, 19th, 18th, so that gives us a couple weeks to get everything dialed together. We'll use the model from last year and as far as the announcements go, and now we've got Kalen clicking on all cylinders here, so we can put out a call for applications at least 2 or 3 times during that month. And again, as you encouraged your cohort to share those announcements, I would do the same when it comes to these two. And if you know organizations that should apply,
Individuals.
encourage them, especially former recipients of these awards who should be trumpeting its value.
Yeah, and I'll share, and we can all share it on our Facebook pages, I know, too.
Okay, well, we'll plan to put it out month of October. Then have it on your November agenda where you'll have all the applications and then you can review.
And then the other thing, I know you weren't here last time, Jason T. We had a discussion in regards to that event we want to have as far as the forum goes.
Yes.
But wasn't someone supposed to check, like Jason or someone with the city commission, to see if that would work for them? to get
Yes,
as
we
many
want to
involvement?
invite them. When did we look at? It was a Thursday.
February 8th?
I hope so.
February 8th, yep. Hate Crime Open Forum is kind of the loose name we were considering. Or, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that specific. It could just be.
HRC open forum.
HRC Open Forum.
With the HRC.
Yep. But what some of the topics would be is, you know, how do you interact? Because it was a specific ask from the city commission that they want to have conversations with the community to even imagine that there's hate crimes within the community.
How do we go about that, Jason?
Mhm.
Jason, in regards to ensuring that they're at the table as far as this event goes?
I would say get all the details hammered out and take it to the commission, just like Gabe said, if you wanna paint sidewalks, best thing to do is build that alliance at the table. May not get all 5, might get 2. But if I heard you right, there would be others on this panel, there would be others that are part of the discussion, so maybe you don't need all 5 if you're looking to have that broader community conversation. If you're looking to just have a conversation with the commissioners, a little different approach. We'd be very deliberate about what we're going to do there, and we would have to find a time that all of them work and schedule a meeting and put out the agenda and then be very, that's what you're doing. And then that would likely not involve a lot of other organizations because it would be a city commission meeting where that's who you're talking to first.
Initially, it was more of a forum, but type situation, but if we could get all the commissioners to sit down and talk to us.
So there are, my idea would be a preference towards all of them being there along with the mayor. But how do we have a community conversation, which is what the ask was at the hate crime ordinance meeting when it was voted down? It was the main pressing reason it was voted down is because there hasn't been enough conversation with the community about if there is even hate crimes in our community after the hours of testimony about the hate crimes occurring within the community.
You start with more of that open forum and see you get from there and then follow up with a meeting with all of them. To provide that recap and even show the impact of having that community attendance and others.
So start with the open forum with a few of them, such as the mayor and whoever of the city, and maybe the 2 commissioners who said they would like to have a community conversation. We could invite the 3 of them, and if any other ones wanted to join us and have an open forum with, and our thought had been with former podcast guests who had touched on topics of diversity and inclusion within the community or lack of. And maybe not bring specific organizations, but then allow community comment also or questions.
Just thinking, because you're gonna want some sort of event for like one of the other pieces outside of that specific conversation, but
Right.
you could just do the meeting and then have the event be something.
Because we have to walk this line of not turning it into just this open forum where everybody can come and just give an opinion. But if we also don't want, if there's facts on both sides.
So we could do an invitation to some community stakeholders and say, we're interested in having this open forum. Are any of you interested in coming? Here are some of the topic ideas. We would like you to come prepared, instead of just throwing an open mic into the audience, but invite some members from the community up onto the stage with some of our leaders. Would that be a better?
And like, with it being an open forum, are you still allowed to like even do like the call for submission, like for those things that people like have to kind of submit ahead of time? And then
Yeah,
presumably if you get enough stuff that can take up all the time versus having to open up for like the more public comment piece.
agreed. And then we kind of have an idea of what will be there, so we're not blindsiding any of our leaders who are being kind, but also facilitating an openness to have those hard conversations if need be.
And then also figure out too, because otherwise you might get out of scope.
Okay.
maybe touch on like certain topics. We want to touch on like hate crime is one of them, but topics that we want to cover.
So picking like 2 or 3 topics that this committee can come together on. Okay. I still like just throwing a hot mic into the crowd, but I understand some of the hesitation.
I just don't find it to be the most effective.
Joking.
Mine, I'm just thinking like, since after like we had the whole debate on hate crimes, we haven't like had time to debrief with this. I really wanted to know where their minds were when they were voting. And if you take them out again and put them in a position where they might be defending that vote, because there's still some of them, some left and some are still in there. We might end up having them defending the vote, and 3/4 of the times you pick a side, make a point, and you stick on it. Why don't you just stick with the 2 people who wanted to have the conversation? They asked for it. It's easy to pull them in than like trying to go like meet new people and they end up like, I didn't ask for this. So the people who asked for it, we invite just them, then we can invite like other community members to join them.
Yep.
The other thing is, though, that there are 2 commissioners who weren't on the commission when we went to this
And
conversation.
that's what she's saying, maybe don't invite them to this conversation. And
Those are the ones I think that would be, one of them would be,
Anne
Or
is
for what we're
actually a
doing.
good, I'm thinking Anne would be a
Yeah.
good one to attend
I
actually.
think, yes, and she's one of the ones that was not on the committee before.
Yeah, but we can extend it to Anne, but it should be an extension, not like we want you.
Okay.
You must be or something.
so being thoughtful about how we navigate this.
So we don't put them, we want to create a narrative and control the narrative too. Basically, I know we want it to look like a debate type of thing, where you really don't want to like, then people end up like just picking sides and sticking there. I'm still really thinking that we focus on who wants to talk about the issue. Then you can push them to whatever extent you wish.
Maybe even phrasing it as just community conversations of diversity within the city, instead of pigeonholing it into
Yes.
one topic.
Is it more important than Zinker?
Otherwise, I worry too that if you are kind of saying that, okay, this is who we want versus who we don't want, that could lead to people not being receptive later on if they feel like they're being left out, especially if you're get that perception of you're being left out for a specific reason or something like that.
I think
And
we
that's-
just open up to all of them.
Yeah, and that's like I think it open to all, but really conversations need to not be emotional, like data driven, factual.
I was just gonna kind of wrap all this up. I guess what I'm hearing is a desire to have those commissioners that said, hey, we want these conversations, to have them there, but I don't know that you'd want to exclude them. I think what you'd want to do is get your program put together. I like the idea of having applications. I like the idea of or calling for specific stories. Having a structure to those individuals that tell their story, but then you engage the commissioners by telling them what you're going to do, you invite them to the program, and respond to them and say, we're doing this because we heard you say, back in 2022 in June. And you can't force any of them to come, but if you give them enough notice and invite them publicly, you can hope for the best. And I would assume that there would be any others outside of just city commissioners that are invited to listen to these conversations because it's part of a, dare I say, a series. Or maybe you focus on one topic 1 month and then you've got 2 months later, you do another topic and you do another topic and there starts to become conversations, plural. You guys are the ones that are really guiding those conversations based on topics, based on stakeholders, and constantly inviting the public and the commissioners to attend those things to hear it.
Yeah.
I think if you do those, you know, on a certain cadence too, like that shows actual commitment to it versus like a 1 year one-off thing, like it's
Yeah.
just a conversation, but this way you kind of have that follow-up and feel committed to it.
So then you're looking at a moderator, you're looking at a venue, you're looking at programming, cadence, as you said. Might want to pick 3 or 4 topics to start with and just figure out who would be the best 3 people to tell their story on a stage so others could hear. Not to necessarily put them out there to have questions,
No, I was just thinking.
but I guess you have to decide what the engagement is, or maybe what the person on stage, what they're comfortable welcoming. Because I can see these going sideways in a hurry, knowing how this town can get turned around. And I realize that's not your intention by any means. But to have a conversation, it has to be 2 sides. You can't just have someone sitting up and lecturing to a bunch of people in a hall, because then it's a lecture. So how do you get that dialogue from those that are listening to those that are on stage telling the story?
There has to be a way to bridge both sides so that there's an open exchange between the two. So relatability on both sides.
I think that becomes part of being intentional with who you select to speak and stuff too, because I know some people who I think are just really impactful and explaining things in a way that resonates with people a little bit differently and helps to open up eyes a little bit more, open up that communication and reach a level of understanding as opposed to causing more of the divisiveness.
And don't forget about the police department,
Yeah.
because if there is reported hate crime coming to them, so you might think about how you can surround yourself with information that they can share before you get too far down the road here too.
That's where you get good data from too.
Yep.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, and then you would be thinking about somebody like Officer Katie Horn,
I was just gonna
who's
say.
on the community outreach, community service side of things to, if it's not Katie, then who? Tell us that, but I think it'd be good for some law enforcement personnel.
I think that could help support just some of the different work that's being done in the community too. Like, well, I think of like when we do the community health needs assessment and trying to get those audiences or getting the right people taking that and identifying the needs. This could be one of those ways too, to help better inform and get those voices.
Celebrating what we are doing as a community also. You know, we're celebrating the community as well as challenging to further engagement. Okay. A lot
We do it
So-
maybe quarterly. And then,
quarterly
Is
stuff.
is this meeting enough time to invest in this, or do we,
yeah,
subcommittee, I know, but do we need one for this? Because this is
Yes.
a big
It's a
undertaking.
big
Yes.
undertaking.
I'd be interested in being on that.
Okay.
Here we go, there's more.
You've lost
In the
your
coffee
quorum,
shop.
so you can't make any decisions at this point. You're just
Yeah.
So
discussing things, so.
can we add a potential subcommittee on the agenda for next
I
subcommittee?
apologize, I'm not bored with all of you. It was
See
a
how it is.
long
I see how
weekend.
it is.
Okay,
So next meeting, you would like, in addition to Gary's item carried over, you would like the idea of the community conversations subcommittee.
Are we allowed, you know how like other boards can have random people on their subcommittees? Is that allowed in this level or is it?
we can have community members come in at any time, can't we?
Yeah, you can bring stakeholders in, as far as. When we notice the subcommittee meetings, we notice them as public meetings because it is a designated subcommittee of this group. And therefore, your notice is out there and anybody can show up. So if you invite stakeholders to those.
that would make sense, because that'd be helpful for like something like this, or, you know, depending on where things go with the MEI and thinking of some of the work, then you can bring in those people who are going to have that influence and like.
Thank you, yes. I'm starting to jump into people's conversations, I apologize. Historically, if I remember correct, when we looked at the anniversary information, this committee used to hold forums at BSC.
That would be before my time.
Okay. Come on, I thought you've always been. If I remember correctly, when I was looking back through stuff on the website,
You're right.
yeah, they used to hold public forums, and Carla Busnick was a part of that conversation when she was on the committee. She now is on another committee in town. Caitlin McDonald and a couple others that work on housed and different issues. I'll have to look into that. But looking at a facility like that, whether they would be willing to partner with us, since they have a committee of which I sit on and haven't attended for a few. If they'd want to partner with us and then be able to access facilities that were more conducive to a conversation like this. I don't know. So just some thoughts. I will stop throwing ideas out. It's getting to be a late meeting.
Can I just put a request for our next meeting that we have our budget, like know what's left in our budget?
Yes.
Just because I don't know how far in advance, but if there's a potential partnership opportunity in February, I don't know if we want to discuss that before December or wait till January, but if we had an idea where we're at, I might bring it up.
Especially because January would usually be MLK.
And okay, and then there's the Global Neighbors Gala in 2024, not 2020, obviously, February.
Is it in February?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Just so we kind of have an idea where we're sitting there.
I'm going to ask one last question in regards to other business. Are you having more conversations with Minot or Fargo regarding with them and having that discussion?
No, to the best of my knowledge, Minot is in limbo at the moment with their actual committee. They are not a functioning committee right now. They have been put into limbo according to a city commissioner I spoke with up there. Fargo, I have made, because I had the one conversation, she is no longer the chair and has directed me towards the new chair. And so I will be having a conversation with them before our next meeting. Can we also make a note in the email going out that as it's end of year, we are having quite a few things we're trying to address, and full committee participation would be appreciated? Or something along those lines. Yeah.
We understand life gets busy, and if you are busy or this is no longer able to be a priority, they can just let us know.
Is that okay to put that in the email? Okay.
Also thinking ahead, committee member terms expire at the end of the year. And I can't remember, is it Sargiana? No, Darcy and one other name. And so we'll have to look
I
at.
don't think it's me. Maybe Whitney knows.
Yeah,
Maybe I'll
she and I
be over
she and I just looked the other day, so we'll figure it out, but
It's
Or-
me. It's been grand knowing all of you.
for those that haven't exhausted their number of terms, they can reapply. You would need to reapply if you're interested in serving again. If you're not, then you would just simply be done end of the year. So, but all of our committees that end in December, we'll do the call for applications in November, and then recommendations will be made to the city commission in December, and then assuming there's potentially new members and then reappointed members, then we just step in January.
Oh, it is Sargiana. It's 3. It's Darcy, Nicole, and Sargiana.
There you go.
I'm
You're
nervous.
stuck with me till the 25th.
I'm getting nervous.
Oh, gosh, I'm on.
Your campaign can start anytime.
Can she legit, like, when can people start filling out their applications?
In November.
Okay.
We'll open them all up at the same time. So the month of November will be applications for advisory boards. Will also be the application for Bismarck Citizen Academy.
Where is Carl on there? When's his up?
Can you scroll up? 2024.
Geraldine, Carl, and Sassy are 2024.
Oh, Sassy was 542.
Yep. And myself, Tia, and Gabby are 2025. How does it feel like I've been here forever?
And
already?
but that's technically this is technically my first term since I took over somebody's, correct?
Right, because you came in on an unexpired term,
Same.
so, yeah.
That's weird
I think,
about Jason and I, because we came at the same time.
I was an unexpired term.
Oh,
and then
okay.
reappointed for a full term, and I think Darcy's on the end of her second full term,
And there's only 2 full terms?
correct?
So this is my first full term, so technically if in 25 I would be reappointed by city commission, it'd be till 28.
Correct.
Okay, because they're 3-year terms.
Yep. And if you're on a year, or if you're off a year, you can reapply. If you remember, Trevor got termed out, or, well, no, he didn't, he got. Yeah, that's right, it wasn't his term. That's right, so. But yes, we'll make all the announcements and see what kind of interest we get.
All right,
It's adjourned.
yeah, at that point, let's adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
That's adjourned.
Well, Cassie said she'll give me her, my tomorrow, but I'm sure that
Tyler,
Tyler would have very open this weekend.
I would prefer Sunday so I can.
I apologize for such a late meeting. I did not